Hi, welcome to this Open Security Summit session in September 21, where we're going to have another really cool session with Mario, who's going to lead the ASVS user stories creation. And we're actually going to start also talking a little bit about a new concept that we have in Open Security Summit, which is projects, which, this relates very well to this. And I highly recommend, you guys take a look at this project because it is connecting a lot of dots. And it's definitely one of the ways we're going to scale security, and we're also going to scale ASVS. So the concept of projects, very quickly, is that we, at the moment, if you kind of go into the summit, right, you see that we've done lots of sessions. There is really cool content. In fact, we even have amazing content, right, from the previous years, right? So if you look at some of the stuff that we've done in the previous sessions, right, and Mario, your photo must be in here somewhere, right? You came to a couple of these, right? This is the on-site ones when we did it, but also we got the virtual one that, again, we have tons of sessions that at the moment, like all this information, right, is sort of lost in the kind of world of the summit. So what we basically trying to do, actually I should go on the main website, right? Sorry. What we want to do is to consolidate this and start to create these environments where we can give focus and energy to a particular topic or project. And, and there's total flexibility to almost figure out how wide or how small it should be, right? So, you can have DevSecOps and Kubernetes, which actually are big topics of risk governance, or we can focus into something like ASVS, multiple development, SAMGRAP, etc. So I think it's more about energy. It's more about having, people involved, creating content, etc. But I also like this idea of having a place, for example, that, anybody or I can reference to say, hey, you want to learn more about threat modeling, go to that page. You want to learn more about worldly maps, you want to learn more ASVS user stories, go there. And we, in the DevOps world, we start with something that, kind of does the thing, but it needs a lot of work, where, and that's just an example, right? Because Mario, you deserve that. I just put my name there, so at least it was not just you.
Fair enough.
But the idea is that we can grab the videos. This is actually like we'll talk about those big videos, right? But then all the sessions, but then all the materials that we have, and then we also allow companies to sponsor this, right? So we're also trying to now have a membership model. So again, the projects become a nice thing for a company to sponsor, right? And eventually I want to also use some of those funds to fund. In fact, we're already using some of those funds to fund, in this case, we're getting some resources from Upwork to help with maintaining, updating, etc. Right? So all of this, as with everything in the summit, is managed by GitHub. So the projects are on content projects, and you can see that in here, for example, you got this layout, which is fundamentally now metadata that we can add. So we can have the description, the organizers, the active members, the highlight videos we want, add some metadata to it, etc. So the whole point of this is that we can have, basically metadata, but also pages. And the idea of these pages is to have things like FAQs, more information, maybe videos or other relevant information about that project. And the SVS actually is a very good example of one that has evolved. But you could see that most of these projects will have the same structure, right? And that's the idea. So this is the content that is here that is basically, that you could see, in this case, multiple development, that you'll be able to see here, right? In that environment. So what kind of will happen? My expectation is that the projects will start in these environments, and that's, I think, enough for a lot of the projects. But some projects, ironically, like the ASVS, I think they already need their own repo, right? So, and this is amazing, right? If you look at this, there's already a great piece of work that's done in here where we're mapping the information. And then, you could see already a lot of the great work that has been done by Mario and others on these actual sessions. So actually, one of the things I want to talk to you about, Mario, I think we need to put a Hugo website in front of this or something, so you can actually leverage both, right? You can have also a nice way to browse the content and to have a more feature-rich, way to navigate this content, right? And this project. And then we want to think about how can we have content here shown in the main project page, right? because I think this is the evolution of, fundamentally that site, right? Where we basically have, content. And I would love to be able to show this content in this environment, right? So we need to think about, how we can make that happen, right? But that's kind of it, right? The idea of the projects is to start to consolidate and, in a way, I would say, give good justice to the amazing content that is being created during these sessions, so that when we have a session, or when we have a great part of a session, we can then amplify that and distribute it and push it all sorts of different places, but also make it easy to consume, right? And so, so the idea is, Mario, like I want you to be on a driving kind of seat here, not necessarily building it, because the summit is we're gonna get some resources, and of course the community can help a bit, but I almost want to expand your ideas on what we could do and the best ways to present this, right? Again, this is just the first pass, right? It has not been designed, it has not really been evolved, but I think it's a good start. And then the final just variable here is that we also are playing with the idea of having a separate YouTube channel, because the Kruun YouTube channel is great, but in a way, it almost has the biggest sessions, but it has amazing content, right? Like if you actually go and look at, the content we have here, it's pretty spectacular, but it's quite big, right? We have large sessions, which makes sense, because it's almost like the summit is the place where we create the content, right? In fact, I wish we had saved the videos for some of the sessions we had on site, right? Because they were, again, amazing sessions. But then the idea is to create 5, 10, 15 minutes, snippets of those, videos that we can then put, again, on the project environment. We can put on on social media. We can make it easy to consume on specific pages, which will allow, I would expect, a lot more, usage and a lot more, I would say, dissipation of information. Is much easier to share a 3-minute, a 5-minute, a 10-minute video than is a 2-hour video, right? Which, even there's that space, which makes sense doing a session, but it doesn't make sense when you just want to, learn about something, right? And I think actually on the ASVS is interesting, because it's almost like it'd be great to have a video about this section, right? So when you guys were talking about this, we can even start to try to figure out, where is the video, where is the time where you're talking about this, because that particular video is going to have a lot of, I would say, metadata or information and reference for this particular, item, for example. Any comments, ideas, other things we could do?
No, I think that all makes a lot of sense. With regards to the presentation, that's the bit that's more to kind of figure out what the best solution is. It may be overkill, but one of the things that I really like is how the Oauth SKF project does. So they use Django. Yeah, the SKF. Have you used it?
Yeah, I play a little with it. Yeah, it's pretty
I
cool,
use
right?
it sometimes, particularly with internal teams. The interview parts, etc. They're really good, but they don't cover what we're trying to cover here. Right? So they have kind of mappings. They do a lot of, namely on CWE, CWE things directly to cheat sheets. They have a few cheat sheets are well mapped, but don't have kind of the a lot of the direct relationships that we're trying to build here, in no reference to compliance as code stuff, generally speaking. But,
yeah, no, look, I don't think it's overkill, right? I guess the question is just, the best way to do it, right? Because, the reality is that what this allows you to do is to have a much better way to consume it, right?
Yep.
And ultimately, right, it's not working, but yeah, I agree with you, right? Because I feel that having something like this allows, right, a much better experience. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, because you've done the heavy lifting, right? Like the heavy lifting is here, right? That's why I was thinking that starting with a simple Hugo website, because it already gives you a navigation, right? Already allows you to. I think we talked a little bit in one of the sessions, but allows you to, for example, add metadata to the top here, right?
Yep.
And then allows all sorts of other processing and indexing, etc. Right? So if you look here at the top, right, the problem with this is that this is hard to parse,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
So, you almost want to, but if you look at the way the summit works, right? If you look at, how, the pages are set up, right? For any of the content, right? Any of the sessions, right? If you look at, if we even look at the, this session, right? Oops, I think it's this one here, right? Yeah, if you look at this, right, you could see that having that helps a lot, right? So basically, I think you want to, and this is what you get from Hugo, but also this is Markdown supports this. But if you come up with a schema that you want to add to every one of these, right, it would make it much easier to put on a website, but also start to parse it. And even as people look at customizing it or even understanding the status of this page, right?
So something that happened in the meantime that wasn't available when we first started with this structure was OSCAL. Have you looked at OSCAL?
Yeah, I think that's
So thinking about leveraging metadata in the JSON format, etc., to make it really easy to dot your way through stuff when you want to look for it, etc.
Yeah.
I think OSCAL seems to be where the direction of travel of NIST and and everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that would be a good way even to integrate with so even if you think across the ecosystem of OSS projects, because some stuff that we do is related more worldly maps on strategy side of things, other ones more risk and governance, etc. Applying the metadata format or the structure of OSCAL to all of that would make it interesting. To aggregate in a standard format, right, to make everyone's lives much easier.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing is, I think it would be good for you to start using this to capture those ideas and your tasks. Because one of the things I would like to also do is to have a page or a section in the site of how to help, right? Or where to start. So if you start to use this as a way to capture, small, medium, large, tasks, it also gives somebody, a good place to start, right? How to do, and even like on a session like this, you might go, okay, I have these 3 items that I want to address, right? So, I've used this quite a lot. If you want, I can show you some references point, right? Okay. We use GitHub issues a lot, right? And we now track a chunk of our projects, and there's tricks with labels and stuff like that that makes a massive difference. So
that's good.
Cool. All right, look, over to you. So there you go. See, there's the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes just about the projects that we can cut and just share when we're talking about ASVS projects. So, and over to you.
Let me share my screen then. So I'm just going to go kind of a quicker way. Feel free to ask any questions, Tofik and Hugo. I'm also looking at the chat. So I'm just going to kind of provide the context of the project, what it's trying to achieve. Should be 5-10 minutes, not more than that, and then we'll go straight into working on where we left off
actually,
on the last few sessions.
One thing that, again, maybe Mario, to leverage that, because you probably know, if you, even for a session like this, if you can then, highlight when those bits starts, again, all of that would just make Adam's life easier, right?
Okay.
Cool.
I will try and. Yeah, but that needs to be seen in relation to how long on the meeting the recording is, right? Or I just do it by absolute hour. It's probably simpler. And then
you can do it like that, because then
the screens probably have the dates anyway. So
but then it's easy. You can calculate. Just then this section, that section, that section, and you're right. Actually, that's a good idea, because then you don't have to go and listen to the whole thing. If you just start taking by the hour, that's good.
Okay. Right, so this is user stories for ASVS, as we were talking about it. So we'll go through these points in the next few minutes. This is a link for ASVS, so usually on these sessions I ask everyone to open it, because we can then reference the same documents and have the conversations. Right, and so this is the general structure of ASVS. It's 14 domains, I think, if I recall, not counting them one by one. And generally speaking, the ones that are in green, user stories that we've already created in the project. everything in black we haven't started. Yeah, and that's about it. So there's still a lot of work to do. We've done a lot of good stuff, but yeah, there's still work to be done here to cover the whole standard. So one of the questions was why I felt the need to create this project. So I think the Oauth ecosystem is really good. Is really good at doing a lot of things and at mapping information between it. So example, the Oauth ASVS standard, which is more of a checklist type document. You've got the different levels of assurance. You've got you can give that to our compliance team and they'll be happy to work with you and tick the boxes and kind of that type of compliance focused orientation. In the Oauth ASVS gives people that, right? We can go through the items one by one depending on levels of assurance and see if we are actually doing the thing or not, and make an assessment on our overall development maturity from a security point of view. In the ASVS, there are some mappings that exist on the Oauth cheat sheets that are directly linked. So if you see the session on session verification or session management verification, you'll go to Oauth cheat sheets and you've got actual snippets of code that tell a developer how they can implement these features and these things that are defined in ASVS.
Sorry, Mario,
yep.
Just a question. Is there a kind of JSON or Markdown or easy to parse version of the ASVS?
Yep. So you've got on the document, you've got JSON, CSV, and another kind of friendly format for parsing.
Cool. Have you linked that with your stuff?
Not that one in particular, but yeah, but it's there. We can add a link from the main page.
Okay, cool.
So you've got Oauth cheat sheet and you've got some other more kind of smaller or emerging projects, let's say, like the Oauth ASVS 4.0 testing guide, which was someone that created over the past year and a half. And they also give you some guidance on how the requirements in ASVS can be validated in a CI/CD pipeline or manually or whatever may be the case. Now, what I don't think exists is what happens in the middle between these two things, right? Because usually ASVS is more, as I mentioned, more used by the risk and compliance people that they want to make sure that all the boxes are being ticked. At the end, you've got the actual verification to see if people done it correctly. There isn't nothing that I saw on the Oauth ecosystem to actually create the middle. Right, something to help manage the middle. In the middle is the delivery lifecycle, right? It's someone defines a requirement and the engineers need to create a user story in order to deliver on that, which they will use then the validations to do the testing if what they've done is correct. Right? But this part in the middle, what connects high-level requirements on a checklist, there is typically more geared towards compliance people, and the actual validation when it's deployed, it's this bit in the middle that I don't think is well covered at the moment in the Oauth ecosystem, and that's why I created this project. So what it aims to do is really help bridge the gap between these two different functions, right? Because for engineering teams, it's about having off-the-shelf actionable user stories. So things that we are, the stories that we are defining that people can take off the shelf and then apply to their context. So specifically, one of the things that, for instance, is not currently covered in any of the controls of the documents that we've produced so far is acceptance criteria, right? Because there tends to be very context specific. What the acceptance criteria for one context is likely to be different from the other. But this idea that you could just kind of the bulk of the user story could be taken off the shelf to help teams reuse the same artifact across a whole organization, even in contextualizing the acceptance criteria is the benefit that this can have for engineering teams. Then for risk and compliance teams, it really helps with compliance, because if all of these user stories are, for instance, tagged with metadata relating to the ISO 27001, ASVS, or whatever compliance requirements organizations have, or policy or risks, or however it makes sense from the way you do security governance, in your organization. It allows the teams, if they have visibility of these user stories, they can augment it with metadata and use that as evidence in their security management system, as opposed to the usual alternative, which is get loads of engineers in a room once a year and ask them the same questions over and over again to see if the response is different. But this allows an integrated way of the management system, allowing for going from the risk compliance type stuff down to the level of what code was developed to do this and what's the continuous validation that I've put in my CI/CD, and have this kind of traceability throughout the system. Another benefit for risk and compliance teams is that we go on to the level of trying to do the gherkin syntax that is usually used in BDD. So because what that gives us is it allows risk and compliance teams, which may currently have an aversion for the idea of writing code, it gives them a way to try and do the decomposition required to write those validations. And we will walk through a few examples, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But it's this idea that if people can write the gherkin syntax for a validation, they can probably write the validation as code with the compliance as code domain specific language, but because they tend to be very English-like and not be very complex or complicated. Right, so there was this basically to be used as a tool to facilitate communication and situational awareness across different types of teams that have worry about different types of things. So user story. So defining requirements for most compliance and risk teams usually comes in a static checklist. That's not usually the format that engineers like to work on things. So most technical teams are already using user stories, and if you can help them on writing those user stories, their acceptance criteria, we are already making a lot of communication benefits. Because we're not requiring another level of abstraction and translation to happen in the middle of this process, right? So the teams can actually collaborate on an artifact that is then going to be used on the process, as opposed to being something else that we need to get on a meeting and agree what each other means by the different use of words. So a user story is really a small piece of work that represents some value to an end user and can be delivered during a sprint. That's the simplest way to think about it. There is, this is one of the accepted ways of thinking about what makes a good user story, and it's through this invest criteria, which means it has to be independent, so it could be developed in any sequence and doesn't affect other stuff. Negotiable, so it should be up to the team to decide how to implement them, and that's also why I didn't include the idea of adding standard sets of acceptance criteria to the user stories that we've developed so far, because I think this needs to be part of the developer's agency to negotiate exactly how this is done, right? And the acceptance criteria is exactly how the things are going to be done. So that's why I stayed away from trying to give generic views on that. It should be valuable. Each story delivers the test unit of value, estimable. So we should be able to understand how much time it's going to take us. So in teams that work in Agiles, there's the concept of a spike. So if you don't know exactly what it is that how much effort is going to be needed, you do a spike to determine how much effort is going to be needed, basically, or the different options that you may have available. Should be small, so you should be able to do the whole design, code, and test in one sprint, and it should be testable, right? The clear acceptance criteria, so that anyone at the end can see was this thing delivered on or not. So the basic anatomy is that we've got a type of user, a persona that wants an action so that they have a benefit or get some kind of value, right? And that's how stories are usually built. So every organization that I've worked in does this slightly different. I haven't seen two organizations that write stories exactly in the same way. So there will always be kind of small variations, but largely they all do the same things in terms of this type of syntax, etc. Some add features names, some don't. It's that type of variation that you'll see depending on the organization. But the idea is that you'll work on a security feature as a security engineer. I want to allow only safe character sets in HTTP responses so that I can prevent unsafe character sets which could obfuscate malicious activity. So when we then go look into how to do this, we think about things like UTF-8, ISO 88591, that type of stuff. So once you've got the user story written like this, as security engineer, I want to, so that we can start thinking about the scenario. And this is where the gherkin syntax usually comes in. So given an HTTP response, and I know I'm going to have a security header within it, when I specify the content type, then I'm going to make sure that it's either UTF-8 or ISO 88591. Because that's what 14.4.1 in ASVS tells us that we should be doing. Which, if you can do this, I think it's not a big stretch to consider that you can probably also do this, right? Because it's basically saying the same thing, which is we've used the HTTP method. It's going to access a URL, and it's going to check the headers, specifically the content type, and it expects this is kind of a should be text HTML UTF-8, right? If you can do the gherkin syntax, you're at least 60–70% of the way there to be able to be less uncomfortable when someone asks you to write on compliance as code DSL, in my opinion. So that's why I like to add this thing in the middle as well, to start getting more risk and compliance people a bit more comfortable in codifying their requirements as on compliance as code DSLs, which other teams can then integrate directly in their process and improve the feedback loops and how fast they get a view on how they're meeting or not meeting the security requirements. You will also see here that, as Dennis was mentioning, that we, in this example, I am adding two pieces of metadata as tags, which is one, what ASVS requirement this relates to, and what ISO 27001 thing this relates to. So if you've got all of these logs going into a central logging location in terms of the output from doing this on your CI/CD, for instance, then that means you can have an almost real-time view of compliance for your risk and compliance teams, right? Because if this data is being ingested anywhere, you can go look for it. How am I meeting ISO compliance for a particular project? And you've got an automated report without that is created for you every time the CI/CD pipeline runs, basically. Right, so we're not going to do it like this because yeah, this was when we've got more people. So when we break out in groups, we can sometimes use this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with VS Code open, and we're going to do the editing directly on that once we start the conversation. But this is how we are keeping it when we did it previously. Right, so in terms of the overall introduction on what we're doing, how we're doing it, etc., that was it. Any questions or any comments? Anything anyone would like to share before we go into VS Code? No? Cool. Now, the next question is so we have all of these sections that have already started being populated. There's a lot of stuff we still haven't started, and there's a few things like error handling or authentication that we barely just started. So on authentication, we just did password management and not much more, if I recall correctly. Yeah, we just did a password change up to no composition. This was the one that we were working on last session that we had. So my question is, do you want to continue one of the authentication? Are you particularly interested in any other section that we haven't started and we could start now? Yeah, any thoughts would be welcome on agreeing what we're going to work on today. Anyone? Okay. So what I'm going to suggest then is to start on continue the authentication one. So let me just put VS Code over here. Sorry. I have the chat open if someone wants to say anything. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start going through these and on the authentication session. So let's just okay, so last one we worked on was 2.1.10. 2.1.10. Okay. Okay, so the next one is on the paste functionality. Okay, so let's do this. So what I've been typically doing is copying it, one of the oops. That was most certainly not what I wanted to do. So 1.11. This is about pasting, wasn't it? Paste functionality. Yeah. So this is the actual ASVS requirements. Okay, so in terms of the feature name, what is it? If anyone wants to make suggestions, etc., feel free. Otherwise, I'm gonna carry on. So what could we call the feature? We also talked about previously of potentially thinking about changing the persona we're using. So for most of these, we're using as a security engineer as the persona. Yeah, that's something that I'm happy to then change at some point in time to something else, but I'd rather focus on getting the SVS stuff first, done first, and then think about those more kind of details. So as a security engineer, I want to allow users to use paste functionality to input passwords so that they can use their preferred password managers. I think that works. This password is defective when accessing my system. Okay. So the reason, and this is kind of historical, I think, from when you first started, but we differentiated the user story itself with the scenarios because it's usually at the the same user story can have different scenarios depending on context. There are a few of the controls, I can't remember anyone off the top of my head, but there, if you go through the repo, you'll see some examples where one user story has about 3 or 4 scenarios associated with them, because you can approach meeting that requirement in slightly different ways. So that's, there are some other requirements, particularly on level 1 of ASVS, which kind of the story and the scenario name are almost kind of saying the same thing, because the piece is so discrete as opposed to something that is more yeah, context dependent. Sorry, just give me 1 minute, because yeah, the kids are screaming in the garden. So just a minute. Just by the way, I didn't tell him to shut up. I just closed the window. So yeah, and the dog. I want to, so they can use password managers effectively. So in this part, the scenario, I would probably just keep it as simple as possible. Verify. So how would we write the gherkin syntax for this? So even a password prompt. So it all starts with a password prompt, right? So the user gets request for username and password, and yeah, that's what he or she has in front of them. Yeah, what usually triggers the password manager to do something about it if it's a URL that is included in the password manager. So password prompt, maybe not the best way. Yeah, I'll leave it like that. If someone has a better suggestion on what to name it, feel free to share. So given a password prompt, when the user to input, then pasting is permitted. Pasting. It's not horrible, but it's also not great. But I'm wondering. Yeah, I think I'll leave it like that for now. Let's try. And as I mentioned with a lot of these, yeah, making them slightly better in the future is easier when it's all done, and at least most of the standard is covered. Okay, so another thing that that usually comes in here is that you'll see on all of the ASVS is the references to CWE and NIST. So we tend to use to identify the so CWE. It was 521, wasn't it? 521, yeah. What is 521? Weak password requirements. Okay, it's not very. Okay, and with the Oauth cheat sheet. Now looking for password paste. Now this is just for storage. I'm not interested in storage. It's probably on the authentication. Covers paste, values is to paste. Yeah, but it doesn't have much more here. So I'm just gonna add the link to the authentication, which was in here. And call it a day. Okay. 211. I think I'm going to leave that one at there and go on to the next one. 2112. What is it? And then we're going to finish 2.1. Verify that the user can choose to either temporarily view the entire masked password or temporarily view the last typed character of the password on platforms that do not have this as built-in functionality. Okay. Right, so we need a new file here. Right, so what would be the feature name? Yeah, so for now, I'm just going to focus on the main one, so not on the last type character. So I'm just going to write the scenario for that one, and we'll leave the rest for another one. So view entire master password. So as security engineer, I want to users to view password so that they my system is more accessible. So this, yeah, it's a combination of allowing people to access it if they, for instance, wrote 5 characters on their password, but don't know if it was 4 or 6 or something like that, just to confirm how many characters they added, or even for usability purposes. Some people need to go back and forth through the screen, etc. So I think we can leave it as something like that. So the scenario name. So we would have scenario. Even a password prompt. Masks the user's password when the user wants to check the mask password, then I give this a 7 out of 10, but I think it covers. I'm sure any QA engineer would understand what we're on about, and that's the main thing. Even if they're not kind of 100%, the people that are likely to pick on a lot of this and integrate in CI/CD, they kind of understand where we're coming from. Which is also one of the things that I do in my current place of work. So instead of coming up with wholly or my own ways of doing things, I just went to check how the QA engineers that are integrated into each of the teams in the place where I'm working at the moment, how they are creating all of these user stories, and I just copied exactly what they were doing. But particularly when some of the outputs of these things need to be worked on or developed by different teams, looking at how they consume the information and as much as possible trying to mimic how they can potentially directly consume the artifact in their own process is the kind of the main thing that that we're trying to achieve. This is also 5-1. So what we've done.
So Mario, just on that one,
yep.
right? I think that is an insane important thing to do, right? And again, I'm with you, right? More and more, the more we can align security. Are you capturing some of that here? Like, when you have tests that are almost like one-to-one mapping with a QA check and checks where maybe they're more security focused, right? Because this is a good example of, right? This is a UI thing, right? Like fundamentally, although there's security implications, this is one of the checks that I would expect my QA team to be running this and be checking this and being on the checklist, right?
Yep. And the good news is that usually they're already doing it, right? They may not doing all of the use cases that you want, but the structure, the processes, all of that stuff will already be there. Security can just leverage.
Yeah.
But yeah, completely agree with you.
But you see, that's why I think starting to have metadata for some of these becomes quite interesting, because not all of these would be 100% applicable to QA, but there's definitely a large number that are almost like one-to-one mapping, right? To stuff that either QA is doing, and you're right, then we're trying to make sure we're compatible or at least reuse what they're doing. But a lot of times this allows security to come to the table with like, hey, we already got a lot of stories here for you, right?
Yep. And I actually had that happen less than a month ago. So we had a client, a prospect that asked 1 or 2 security questions. It was relating to kind of authentication around the website, etc. And I had one of the architects come to me, Mario, do you know, someone asked us for this, do you know anything about it? And I just pointed to this project, to the repo, look, here's a user story. Go check it.
There you go, right?
It's simple, right? It's not, maybe we can do it like this, like that. No, this is user story and there's a gherkin syntax there. I'm sure it's at least 80% of what you need, and you can fill in the blanks better than me. So that's kind of the main purpose.
Cool.
Right. So, and I think that for, I can probably view the last. Yeah, let's try and write the scenario for the second one. Might as well. That one is a bit trickier, it seems to me. Tricky is good. Right, so the second part is, the second scenario is you can temporarily view the last typed character of the password on platforms that do not have this built-in functionality. So it's kind of similar. You can show unmasked. Okay, so this is kind of similar, but it's only about the last typed character. So given a password prompt, and the password was, and here is, and the platform doesn't support unmasking capability. So this is where the standard says that this becomes applicable. The platform doesn't support unmasking. When the user needs to check the unmask needs or wants here. And the last character, the last typed character. I forgot to copy the end of the gherkin. Okay, and I think this is, yes, still 5-1, and that's it. Okay, so on this one, the second part is temporarily view the last typed character of the password. So it's basically very similar to the one we had before. But yeah, the platform doesn't support unmasking, and we just show not the whole password, but the last typed character. And authentication in 5-1. Cool. And that is it. We finished the authentication session. Oh, the 2.1, sorry. Yes, there's loads on authentication. So yeah, we still got loads of time. So any questions or comments or anything anyone would like to mention? If not, we'll go to 2.2, authenticator requirements.
I guess my question is, at the moment,
Yeah.
how are you visualizing this? So I can see it's on the website on GitHub.
Yeah.
But is that the only way we have at the moment to consume?
Yeah.
From what you just created?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's why, yeah, as we were talking about previously, we've got kind of two approaches, or we either try to integrate this with something else that is already out there that could potentially make it easier, like the SKF or something like that, or come up with a way to try and visualize this in a different way.
Yep. Sounds good.
So authenticator requirements. So let's do this. New page. New file. 2.1. No, 2.2. Is it 2.2.1? Yes, 2.2.1. Authenticator. Okay. And the first one is AntiAutomation controls. Okay, so we have 2.2.1. Copy this over. This one's a mouthful. I've got both of my kids with a common cold at home. So by now, surely my wife is losing her patience, and I can't blame her. Right, so verify that anti-automation controls are effective at mitigating breach credential testing, brute force, and account lockout attacks. Such controls include blocking the most common breach passwords, soft lockout, rate limiting, capture, ever increasing delays, address restrictions, risk-based location, first login on device, blah, 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 blah. Okay, verify that no more than 100 failed attempts per hour is possible on a single account. That's interesting. Okay, so with regards to these types of requirements, we did for some other examples. Let me see if I can find one. Yes, So this is an example. So instead of trying to create user stories that are very specific to all of the different things we talked about, so we've got captures, rate limiting, all those other things, I tend to try and capture them more generically. I kind of give it a name. In this case, it was sensitive information that I reference on the story. And then we just say that, yeah, the sensitive information can be X, Y, and Z. Right? Otherwise, we would be potentially creating one scenario for each of the different things, and that's just too much text that adds no value, in my opinion. So this is kind of the approach that I've been taking, and that I suggest that that we use here, unless someone has a better idea. Yeah, so that's the thing. So on other example, feature name. This is AntiAutomation. Given the amount of times that I'm failing captures in the last 2 months, I do think I am a robot. But yeah, that's a side note. AntiAutomation feature name. Let's just call it AntiAutomation controls. Rules against authentication requests. Yeah, probably works. Okay, so as security engineer, I want to implement AntiAutomation controls so that my system is protected against what do I want to call it? So my system is protected against authentication attacks. I'm not sure this sounds very good. Do you have any suggestion on how to reword this? Of my system protected against authentication attacks.
Well, so what we're trying to do,
malicious,
controls
yeah,
effective
against malicious authentication attempts.
Yeah.
Or unauthorized.
Well, but also you also protect
yeah.
against account lockout.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's one of the problems, right? Because when you do automation, right, one of the challenges is that if this prevents the need to block accounts after a certain number of password failures, right? Do you cover that here, or is that something that you?
So that's kind of a second order effect, right? So unless there is something that we could so the end of this control is exactly the kind of the scenario that you're talking about, right? No more than 100 failed attempts. So 10 years ago, no one would think it was sensible to put 100 failed attempts on an event, right? But obviously we didn't have all these other measures that we can now use to give us more assurance. But that's kind of more of a second order effect, right? Not so much a first order thing.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it ends up acting as a compensating control, right, for the for the lack of just blocking if it happens 2 or 3 times. Unauthorized authentication attempts. Okay. So the next part would be on the scenario, which is scenario name, validate.
Yeah, because this requirement is actually about AntiAutomation controls are in place. Sorry, I thought capture was there. It doesn't mean that So the question is which ones, right? Well, then is you have to validate existing, right?
Yeah.
Anti-automation controls, right?
Validate anti-automation controls protecting against unauthorized application attacks.
Should, and here's the thing, you know, when above, is it authentication attempts or authentication attacks? Because you don't care about an attempt, you care about an attack, right?
Yep. Yeah. If I'm saying it's unauthorized, I'm already talking about the non-legitimacy of it, right?
But you want to prevent it's being successful, right?
Yes.
Like I'm saying, like in a way, there's always going to be attempts, right? So that's always going to happen, right?
Yeah, yeah, true.
Right. The question is successful, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, no. Then shouldn't it be successful authentication attacks, right?
Yeah.
Because that's
say that again.
Successful, right? Because that's what you're trying to prevent, right? I want to prevent successful authentication attacks against my system.
Yep, true.
Right?
Yep.
Okay, then that is really cool, right? As a security engineer, I want to implement. Yeah.
Yep. Sounds good. So in terms of writing the gherkin for this, so given
on the scenario, don't you now need to go a bit more specific, right? Because you need to now say, or else you're going to be very generic, right?
Yes, but so what I would usually so what I've done for some of the other ones would apply like this here. So I talk about the authentication event, right? That's the thing that is happening that prompts the user through this journey. So there's the login event, and I request a anti-automation. I get prompted by an anti-automation measure. Well, not necessarily, because it can be. So there are things like captchas. There is actually a fixture that you need to put in, right? There are other ones such as blocking IPs and location restricted. That is not so much about the event, but more about what happens on the back end with the user behavior, right? So we've got two types of controls here. Ones that are more capabilities that are user facing for them to interact with, that are part of the measures that we're putting in place, and other ones about the behavior of the backend when certain types of authentication things happen on the front end, right?
Yep, makes sense.
So I think then that it makes sense to maybe write a scenario for each of the two ways. So one of them for the things we can provide the user the ability to interact with, like captchas, and another one for everything that happens on the back end as a result of the events that are being detected through the front end.
Okay.
Okay, let me try. So let's see, validate. Effectiveness of anti-automation capabilities. Users. So there would be one of the scenarios, and the other one to validate effectiveness of capabilities. By the system, enforced by the system. Okay. So on the first type, we have given a login event. So this is about the overall login event. in the I don't know, a login page. It starts at the page, not the, because I didn't want to break it out the other parts of the event. So I've got a login page, and I have and I present a login screen. Then I present a user facing capability. When the user introduces login credentials, how do I break this down? Given, so login page, I present the login screen, and the user puts in the credentials, and then I want to show them a captcha in this case, or captcha type thing.
So I really like where you're going with this, but then it's almost like, don't you want to cover the two scenarios, which is the happy path, which is given a login page, and I present a login page, and the user logins, with valid credentials, and he doesn't see anything different, right?
Yeah.
And then you want to have another scenario, which is, it's almost this is from the user side, but then you want to have so as an attacker, if the attacker is brute forcing the stuff, we want his attempts to be, prevented.
Yep. Okay. So how would we translate?
Well, this is the happy path, right?
Yeah.
So you want this to work, right? You want this. We want the user. So here's the thing: like when anti-automation capabilities are effective, the normal users don't see it.
Well, you've got a lot of pages that just present a captcha to everyone, right? When you first log in.
So that's the interesting thing, right? Because maybe you say is.
And that would still be within the. So doing it like that would still make us meet the requirement of 12.221, right?
Yeah. So I haven't seen the other ones, but could you say that falls between the acceptable business risk or UI guidelines? Like it's an acceptable risk, right? Because remember that adding a captcha introduces attrition, right?
Yeah, it does.
Right, like you've probably been in conversations where the question is minimize attrition, right? Like take everything away. So actually, a caption, it's a real example of us introducing attrition in a pipeline, right?
Agreed. Yeah, personally, I prefer having the backend stuff with good logic on
exactly right
normal behavior and what's not, than presenting stuff to the users, right? But the requirement, right, can be met with both approaches. So that's why I was trying to cover for both types of scenarios.
Yeah, well, that's why I was thinking that if you can put something around acceptable business risk or business process or product process.
But so I understand from an overall governance point of view, but I think that's absolutely relevant to the QAs, right? Which would be the audience of this type of artifact. So I generally try to stay away from mentioning compliance on the text or anything relating to risks, right? Because this is further down to the right? That should have been dealt with previously.
Fair enough.
Just because if not, we start adding a lot of kind of governance type language into the artifacts, and people don't like it, right?
No, that's why I was asking, because I want you have to be, if that's your role, right, to be consistent with the way you do the other ones, right? And and I don't know about the other ones, so
So, and again, that's how I think these artifacts can really be used, right? If we were talking with a development team thinking about how to prevent authentication-based attacks, we could open this document and say, look, we've got two approaches. We've got the attrition route, and this is it. And we've got the other way, which is think about what we have internally, if we do have the data and the capabilities to do ourselves the logic of what constitutes normal behavior or not, and use that as the mechanism instead of presenting users with with crossroads and signs and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So when these introduces valid, I think let me just confirm. I think I'm missing a verb on the gherkin syntax that is useful here for this type of scenarios. Here it is. Given, when, then, and, but. Okay. Is it just capture? Oh, actually, at this point, we don't know if it's valid. This is login credentials, and I present them with. So here I'm presenting them with the anti-automation measure, right? Like a captcha.
Yep, correct.
And I present them with an anti-automation measure.
The an or the?
Then, sorry, say that again.
The an anti-automation or the anti-automation measures?
And I think it's an, well, and usually you don't have more than one, right? So there are a few different ones you can do.
Okay.
But so I think the trick here on this one is that I present something, right?
Yeah.
So I'm showing them something for them to interact with, as opposed to kind of the logic that we can do on the back end to try and detect malicious activity.
But on the other hand, you're already kind of implying that the anti-automation is then on the front end. And like we said, there's ways to do it in the back end, right?
Yeah, so that's why we're keeping the two scenarios moved. So I'm going to leave this scenario as I present and they interact with something. In the second scenario will be we do our logic on the back end to detect the malicious stuff. So I'm trying to make that distinction between the two scenarios. So this is on the scenario of the anti-automation capabilities being presented to the user. Right?
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
So and I present them with an anti-automation measure. Is this a then? No. Then I validate the results of the measure and allow access if credentials are valid. That makes sense. I think it covers it. The overall scenario. So thinking captcha and captcha-like measures. So we've got a login page. We present a login page. The user puts in the credentials. Then the anti-automation measure is also presented to them. We validate the results of the measure, and we allow access if the credentials are valid.
Yep.
Yep. I think kind of a proper QA engineer will probably one or two of these steps, they will probably break them down a bit further, but I think it's understandable. So I'm going to suggest we kind of move on.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah, so in the other one is enforced by the system. So instead of presenting stuff, when the user introduces credentials, then I assess the, not validity, but so I want to portray the idea that we kind of make an assessment, right? So, for instance, we may look at common breach passwords. We may look at delays between attempts. So these are all things, restrictions. So these are all things that that we do kind of on the background. So we assess not the. I don't know why it doesn't even exist as a word, but the word on my head is riskiness, right? So how risky is this login event, given all of the data that we have?
What's the threat?
The threat. Yeah, the threat posed by the request, and I apply.
Yeah, you see, I really think you need to start giving an ID to these things, man, because
give what? Sorry,
an ID to these scenarios.
Yeah,
because it will be very hard to then start to take it to the next level, right?
Yep. And then I apply anti-automation mechanisms. Wait. Mechanisms. Only allow users to authenticate. Criteria implemented by the mechanisms. Right, so in these, and I usually add them here. So automation mechanisms for enforce the system can be comprised of which credential can be actually one or more of breach credential testing, brute for account lockout, white limiting, lockout. Oh, we need something else on both of them. And I provide an informative message to the user. So obviously this needs to be seen not too verbose that people know exactly how to circumvent it, right? But it needs to tell the user that something's not right, and to an extent, so that the users know what to, that they're not logged in and what to expect.
Yeah.
So risk-based restrictions, location, right? Blocking with IP addresses. Or something else. Yeah, and I think I can leave it at that. Any thoughts? I think that's good enough, at least to show my QA engine is good.
Validate the results measure. Really cool.
Sorry,
Just confused that.
Yep.
And I provide informative message to the user. It's almost like, okay, the top one is up with login, right? Well, if I, oh yeah, you're right, because because the user sees that enforced when I assessed the thread, then I apply. I can only allow users to authenticate with permissions.
well, actually, we don't need this one.
Are you
here.
sure about that? That's
Which one?
That line. I found that line a bit weird.
This one?
The last one, yeah.
Yeah.
On both
So the thing is, if for instance a captcha isn't working, so just because the captcha is there, it's already telling the user why they're not logging in, right? So the user knows what's happening. If you just get locked out without knowing that there are restrictions being applied to your account, then you don't know as a normal user, right? You may not know that there's something wrong, right? So providing some kind of information on you've been locked for 5 minutes, or you can only, we are increasing the delays between attempts, so you can now log in X amount of time, right? Something in show a counter every time someone puts one on when they can. So those types of things that provide the user, right, the legitimate users that inadvertently get hit by these controls, and there will always be, right, that happens every time, that they get some information that on one hand doesn't expose sensitive information so that people can bypass it, but gives the user at least an indication of what's happening, and an explanation that something may be wrong, or an explanation on why they're not logging in.
But isn't that specific to a particular implementation? I think up until now you kept it high level, right?
Yep.
Because you talked about anti-automation control. Like that feels to me like, a captcha authentication control has to have some UI element, and
Yep.
like lockout has to have an element. In fact, that's the business decision if it has, right? Rate limiting doesn't have a UI element, right? So, do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So, at the moment you kept it nicely and generic on saying, if anything, there it almost like, and I actually what I would add there is actually and raise an alarm, right? Or something like that, right?
Yep.
Because you almost want the sysadmin to know about, not the user.
Yep. That's a good point.
That for me makes sense. You allow the user, and I provide, and I raise an alarm, right, for the current platform, right?
Raise an alarm. Yeah, waiting to then to raise an alarm. Yeah, and that will then depend on each of the teams and how they.
Yeah, in the current platform, right? Yeah, I said correct. They are related to events. Right? Oh no, you don't even alarm. Raise an event, right?
Yep.
You raise an event related, a respective event or something like that, right?
Yes. Yep. Okay. Cool. I think we can leave this one at that. Let's do one more.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So to verify that the use of weak authenticators such as SMS and email is limited to secondary verification in transaction approval, and is not as a replacement for more secure authentication methods. This is, yeah, okay. Let's not discuss the ASVS requirement itself. I agree for levels 2 or 3, but for level 1, I think SMS in the email is probably good enough. But anyway.
Better than not having it.
It's better, exactly. It's better than not having it. So I think that for level 1 of assurance, probably, I don't know, maybe it's overkill. But yeah, it's becoming less so, right? The barriers to entry on better ways of doing things are declining.
Now that's a really good one, the 2.3, right? That usually is one of the biggest security measures you can do, right?
Yep. Yeah, it is. Okay, do you want to do 2.2, 2.3?
2.3.
Let's do 2.3. It's new. 2, 3. Authentication. So, secure notifications. Notifications. Secure notifications are sent to users after updates to authentication details, such as credential resets, email address changes, coming from a non-risk location. The use of push notifications rather than SMS or email is preferred, but in the absence of push notifications, SMS or email is acceptable as long as no sensitive information is disclosed in the notification. Okay. Yep.
That's an interesting use of words, because you can argue that an SMS is a push notification, right? It's
Yep.
almost like they mean, do they mean in-app notifications?
Yep.
That's what they mean, right?
Yep, probably. Because if it's not in-app, it will probably be an email, right?
Well,
at least
exactly,
how the
right?
industry works at the moment. There isn't much more. Yeah.
But it's insanely effective, right? Like, so I would say today, like,
I
my
agree.
bank, right? You go do a transaction, you get a notification, you approve it, bang, right? Like,
Yep.
really sweet. And even like LastPass, right? You try to log in, they'll send you a verification to your mobile device. You go yes, right? Like, that is super strong. And you need 2FA to log in into that app in the first place, right? No, really, really good.
I agree. Okay, so the feature name would be user notifications on authentication detail changes. I think that's it. Yep. So as a security engineer, I want to generate secure notifications. Not generate, and send users a secure notification.
Yep.
Secure. Oh, Lewis has joined us. Hey, Lewis. I want to send users secure notifications.
Hi, Mario.
How are you doing?
Fine. I just had my own presentation, so I was chilling a little bit before joining this
Fair
one.
enough.
Cool.
I want to send users secure notifications when notification details change.
Sorry, Louis, that was definitely one I wanted to see, man. But I came to this one. You had like two of my favorite topics in the same place: hacking, threat modeling, right?
Oh, you're doing on threat modeling.
I was doing on threat modeling, yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll watch it later.
Sure, glad to hear what you think of it.
Okay, so I want to send users. So we've been working on more authentication stuff today. So that's where we left off on the last session. So yeah, as you can see on my screen, we've done these four. We're thinking about doing this one and then close shop. So yeah, we're looking at 2.2.3, which is the notifications sent to users after authentication details are changed. So user notifications on authentication detail changes. As security engineer, I want to send users secure notifications when authentication details change, so that they are made aware of any changes to their accounts, to the security of their accounts.
Are you based on trunk development in ASVS, or are you based on the latest tagged release?
So I'm using 0.2. Sorry. Yeah, for 0.2.
0.2, but the tagged release then, not the.
Yes.
No, not
Not the candidate.
the master branch.
Yeah, the master one.
Okay, gotcha. Which one do you want to make? I mean, I can start typing on my end and send you that. So which one are you working on right
So
now?
I'm working on 2.2.3. Yeah.
Okay, which one
So-
would you like me to do?
You can do 2.2.2. We passed over it very quickly. We
Okay,
thought 2.2.3 was
2.2.
more interesting, so we went straight to that one.
No worries, I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, so sorry, and for some reason I am not where. Okay, I went up. Okay, here it is. Right, so we have notification. So the scenario name would be level secure notifications on authentication is change. So what we do is given user changing authentication details, and we do kind of the same thing as we did on the other ones.
I would rather use the active voice, given a user changes rather than changing, but that's just me.
Okay. Given a user changes like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Given a user changes authentication details. I don't think there's an end here. So when those changes are saved,
Submitted.
those are submitted, then I issue notification. What would be or not perform trigger?
Well, you usually send. I trigger a message on a different
secure
channel
notification
to revert back. Right, that's one thing that usually happens. You get a "was this not you" message on your email.
Yep. So what they mention is either in-app or they mention before you joined me and Dennis were talking about that when they say push notifications, they probably mean in-app, right? Because if it's not in-app, it has to be one of these, right? At least the one.
Yeah.
Bye.
Gotcha.
I'll be there in 10 minutes, okay? Rather than SMS or email. So, yeah, given the user change authentication detail, those changes are submitted, then I trigger a secure notification. And then we can leave the detail that it can be that one or that one. Secure notification and notification to the user. So is there anything else on this? It's really just sending the secure notification, notifying them of the event.
Do you want to delete the next line? Because
Yeah. So this is where potentially going about it in on app.
isn't that redundant, man? When the user change authentication by define, they are submitted.
No, changes authentication details.
Yeah, but the next line, right? You know, is always going to be true when the first one is, right?
Well, yes, but this is kind of setting the context in which this of the user journey, right? In this is setting what is the action that you're going to look at that is going to trigger the next thing, right? I don't know of any other way of going about it.
Yeah, I mean, reading it verbatim would be then I trigger a push notification. right? So then I
Yep.
trigger a push notification if available, else an SMS or email, right? Because not everyone has a push notification available.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, so think about, like, the question here is verify that they are sent, right? So so you're saying that given the user, when I send the notifications, then then the action is I verify that you got there, right?
But
Isn't that?
from a QA point of view, there isn't much to verify, right? It's more of an action happening on the outside. It's
Well,
not.
but now you do need to verify. If that was what the QA need to do, the QA would literally need to confirm that.
Yeah, the notification is being sent. Right?
Yeah, well, and being received, right?
Yeah.
Or sent. Okay, at least it's been sent, right? But I think.
Yeah, no, I was thinking more. So there's nothing on the UI that changes, right? It's just a completely separate channel that doesn't affect. That's kind of what I was trying to.
Yeah.
But,
It's just those two confuse me, because given the user changes authentication detail by design, when the user changes, he's submitting those changes. Unless you want to say when the user starts the change process and those things are submitted. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a bit weird to say.
Let me check the.
And then
No, that's a good point. Let me see how Lewis took care of similar things over here. I know he had a few.
I like that, right? See the way he does the capitalizations? I think that's cool.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the format I sent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I basically took, there's a parser in ASVS, so I have been trying to get them to use a makefile and a container to build the document, which makes tweaking it a lot better if you want to update it or use it as your own corporate whatever.
Yeah.
And using the same parser, I just created this format where I started creating the gherkin entries with given, when, then, and that worked very well. Just a few lines of Python.
Okay. I'm not seeing kind of. So in these examples, so Lewis took the approach of the first given to be about the capability, right? We could potentially take a similar approach over here. So given given the capability to change the user authentication details, when those changes are submitted, like that. Would that work?
I think so. I mean, it makes it very clear, right? So
yeah,
you could add an e.g. Password. I mean, that's basically what you will be changing: password or phone number or 2FA or MFA.
For users to change the authentication details. When these changes are submitted, then a trigger push notification if an available real to the user is sent.
Could you be so kind to put the repo where you're keeping this in the chat?
I will.
I know I have it somewhere, it's just that I don't find it right now.
Yeah.
Open
Yeah,
security.
I hate it when the Zoom thing starts getting on top of. There it is. Yeah, that's the new home.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll add that as a remote.
Yep.
That's to be able to sync with it, because last time I think I had to send you the files per email, and
yes,
I mean,
it was.
that was very old-fashioned, right?
Yep. Okay, so authentication details in the credential resets, email or address changes, and the and that's it. Yep, sounds good. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, so that's much better, man. Because that's the thing. There's the capability for them to do it,
Yeah.
when it's submitted, then you trigger the notification, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Well, then I trigger unavailable.
Yeah, and this is usually around the screen, right? So this
Okay, but there's
positions
also,
the screen.
There's also thing there, like then I trigger notification is sent to the user, like, or if you enable by email. Is that the right way around it? Then I trigger notification, or if an available email is sent, that is there, right?
Trigger push notification to the user. Yeah, just to the user. The sent does need to be there. Yep.
Yeah, that's better. There you
Yep.
go.
Sounds good. Okay, cool. Lewis, I'm going to make the commit on this one.
Okay, I just pulled and then I'll re-pull. Commit and push, not just commit.
Yep.
It's happened to me so often that
2.1.12, 2.1. Oh, I used the wrong.
So in case you ever see my presentation, I even have a Wardley map of threat modeling. Sorry.
Oh, nice.
For
Very
breaking
cool.
for breaking this. So maybe that makes it more interesting for you to look at the presentation, at least the first 5 minutes.
So Louis, one of the things that we want to do now is we want to create like little videos from the sessions. So almost like use the sessions as a way to create material. If you could, it'd be great if help Adam. So Adam is going to help to create the videos. But if you almost want to say, look, here are the best bits, right? Or from 5 minutes to 10 minutes, whatever are the bits that you want. Or also, like, I think in GitHub, in YouTube, we could also tag the minutes. That would help a lot.
Okay, but I can't tag the minutes, right? You only the owner can do that.
Yeah, but if you give the which minutes to tag, then that's easier to do.
Oh, I hear you. Yeah, but watch the session and tag the.
Yeah, so if you watch the session, just say, look, from that minute to that minute, that's a great component of that. So it's almost like you pick what are the top, 3 or 5
Gotcha.
segments from your session. Then we can basically put it in a dedicated, like in smaller videos, and then just publish them.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
And that's fundamentally the idea.
Yep, that's what I've done. Yeah, I've got here a few examples. So my Can talk, I kind of broke it down on the different sections. Yeah, I need to send this to Adam. I need to export it and send it.
Yeah.
Is that the remarkable?
Because even, yeah, it is 2.
Oh, yeah, I have the same one.
Okay. Yeah, I've had the 1 and now have the 2 as well.
Great thing.
But yeah, I think this is even for me to go back. I sometimes like to go on over my old content, particularly Worldly Maps and Cynefin. Sometimes I refer to it, and it's always a complication for me to find my own content. Exactly. So that's why I put this down. When I need to reach out to particular bits of the content that I want to revisit, I can just go straight there.
Yeah.
Right. So I think overall, Luis, if you do you want to review the one you're working on, and then we can close the session.
Sure. I mean, I haven't even started, right? I was talking with you and looking at.
Okay, no worries, no worries. We don't necessarily have to do it. Now, if you want to, I'm happy to do it. But yeah, it would be good to finish in the next 10 minutes or so.
Sure. Gotcha. But I mean, it's probably better if we do it by council now that you have it open. It will take me at least a few seconds to navigate through my mess.
So let's just do 2 together, and then we'll call it a day.
Sounds great.
So 2. Okay.
Is there any particular reason you made it like many small files rather than one with everything?
I'm sure there was, but this was so long ago that I have no idea what was what was the rationale behind it.
Because
I
I
didn't
took the
keep
different
an
approach.
architecture traceability document, so I have no idea.
To be honest, Louis, I think it's better because we need to start thinking about making this content referable and indexed and manipulated, right?
But you can refer to a markdown document based on the tags, right? As long as you're consistent with the use of the tags, you can always refer to tag whatever number.
Yeah, but I think you can see that how big it's already going to become, right? Imagine all that content in one document.
No, not all that, but chapter wise.
Yep. Maybe one for
just like-
authentication, one for
Just like ASVS, right? ASVS is made chapter wise. So there are 15 markdown files or 17 markdown files making up ASVS.
Yep.
And I basically took the same 17 file approach and created the template I shared with you.
Yep.
Since
So-
it was all created by the machine, I just let it run through, not created them myself.
Yep. So there is one of the things that we were that we're talking about before you joined is potentially the idea of looking after. So first thing, I want to finish the content before thinking about the structure of the stuff, right? So finishing the content would be a higher priority for me, I think. But I think the format of OSCAL is something that would really that would be beneficial. So it seems to be that it's going to be adopted as a standard to for structure, for controls and for SSPs, system security plans, and all of that type of stuff, and to make it much easier then to reference, because OSCAL is already starting to get implemented there in OPA and in other projects that are starting to adopt the framework. So it would make kind of sorting through all of this stuff much easier. And we could do, yeah, if we were to have one, yeah. So this is kind of the structure that goes.
Yeah, but I mean,
with it.
I can give you the ASVS in the same structure, right?
Yeah, it has. Yep. So on the main repo, it has in JSON and all of that.
So Louis, I'm interested to see some ideas you have on, for example, creating putting this content in a site in something that you can navigate, or something that you can,
Sure. I mean, I can create this in markdown files, right? So you can navigate if you have a markdown parser. I can create them in HTML. I mean, I am. If you have a chance to look at the branch I committed, or you can look at my repo from ASVS on my GitHub account. I am using, just like they are. Oh God, what's this? Universal parser. So it can read HTML, it can read MD, it can create MD, HTML, whatever you want out of it.
Yeah. But I have to say, because we're using Markdown, it would be good if we can use the Markdown attributes.
It's just ASVS, that one, ASVS, the first one.
Yeah.
So if you look at ASVS, I have a branch. So look at not at master, but at or master is my master. Yeah, master is no. OWASP makefile, that one. OWASP makefile. So I created a Docker container, and I've created a lot of things to be able to create these in different formats.
Okay.
So the execution environment is Dockerized. There's the Docker file to create the execution environment, and you can just substitute and put whatever you want. So you can create a website based on Markdown. You can create a PDF. You can create HTML.
Where is the Docker file?
Yeah.
There's a Docker file under 4. And
Okay.
there's a Docker there, and there's a Docker file.
Cool.
And
Mario, can you put that on the channel of the ASVS channel?
So this is something I'm trying to get these guys to use, because this is the build environment. So you don't have to have anything on your computer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you just have this Docker file, and then inside this Docker file, there's a make file. Well, the make file runs, right?
Yeah.
And the output is just left on your host machine because it is mounted as a volume. So you can what we're doing right now could trigger a GitHub action that builds the document on demand, and I can output it It's using
I
Pandoc.
was
Sorry,
going to
yeah.
say you're using Pandoc there to generate the output, right?
Yeah, and LaTeX. So based on LaTeX, I'm building PDFs, and based on Pandoc, I'm creating Word and everything else you want. So I can
that is
create
cool, because I
HTML.
think the creation of those standalone documents is very important. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've never used Pandoc before. I need to. Have
It's a
look at
beautiful thing. But it's kind of complex. So I try to get the complexity out of it by encapsulating everything in a Docker environment that is a build environment. And now you just run the Docker file and it just spits out PDF, Excel, Word, JSON, and I think even XML.
That's nice.
So, I mean, if you want any particular flavor of JSON, we might just need to, there's a parser there that takes the MD, and out of MD creates the dictionaries in JSON. So if there's any particular, whatever you want to have, then it's just a JSON query that needs to happen to transform one dictionary from one form into another form.
Okay.
So it's
Sounds
relatively
cool.
trivial once you have the data in JSON to operate on it.
Yep, but you need to have it in JSON first, right? On one of the other formats.
It happens as part of the build process, right? So the only thing
Okay.
we need is to have it in JSON. And then from that, I mean, the same script could be used for this project we're working on.
Yep.
And then it's just a matter of creating the Python script in I don't know, a Jupyter lab, and then exporting it to be run inside this container to create the what is it? OSCAL thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, go.
Okay, guys, I'm actually going to jump to the other session, but really cool.
Yep.
Okay.
Nah,
See you later.
yeah, I'm gonna go as well. Yeah, it's 6. I need to go.
No worries, no
prop.
worries.
We can work on
My
those.
children are also arriving, so I also need to go, and it's 7 over here.
Okay.
Continental
Stop.
Europe.
Fair enough.
All right, I'll stop.